Have you ever passed by an old cemetery or a tombstone and thought to yourself, I wonder who that person was, or what kind of life they led, or how did they die? Well, I have. And in this video, I'm going to tell you everything I was able to find out about this guy right here, and who his friend was, and why they died on the same day. So stick around. This is John Talley. We found him in a small cemetery behind another small cemetery. I don't really have a scientific method for how I pick the stones or pictures that I research. So this time, I thought I'd leave it in the hands of my 6-year-old, who I brought along for this particular adventure. We take the kids with us sometimes. We find that it's a great way to teach them etiquette and respect for cemeteries, and it also helps demystify some of it so they're not scared of them. They've gotten so used to it that it's a game in the car now whenever we're driving somewhere, that if they see a cemetery off on the side of the road, they shout out, "Cemetery!" just to tell me that there's one there so I can make a mental note of it and come back and check it out later. Anyway, she picked John Talley for this video, and I gotta say, I think I might let her make a few more picks from now on. John was born on June 3rd, 1874 to J.T. Talley in Caledonia Woods. I couldn't reliably find him on the 1880, 1900, or 1910 census, but on October 23rd, 1916, he married Miss Mary Emma Liggett. Let's have a closer look at their marriage certificate. This is what a lot of them looked like over 100 years ago. It's very similar to what we use now, except there's one very important clue on here that you don't see nowadays. You see this little C beside their names? Can you guess what that stands for? Colored. It was a way to differentiate race at the time. This is actually very helpful to us now because it's one little clue that can help you make sure that you're looking at the records of the right person. And once we get to his obituary, we'll know for sure that he was definitely African American, and this is more than likely, in fact, with 100% positivity, the right guy on the marriage certificate. But if that C wasn't there, I would be concerned that we're looking at a different John Talley, maybe a white John Talley with happen to have the same name. But that extra little clue helps us know we're on the right track. His wife is 19-year-old Emma Liggett, daughter of Jackie and Lou. Her dad worked at the Red Cedar Pencil Company in Lewisburg in 1910. If you like this video so far, please give it a like and a subscribe. And watch it to the end. That's what helps pushes the video out to more people and gets the channel more exposure, and that's what helps me grow. Every little bit helps. On the 1920 census, John states that he is 42 years old and Mary is 25. They have one daughter, Irene, who is 5, which puts her birthday in 1915. But they got married in 1916. Now, there's no telling what that story is about. You know, given that they already had her a year before they got married, and it was a completely different time than it is now. Was it a birth out of wedlock thing? Was it a shotgun wedding where he got her pregnant and he had to marry her? I don't know. Let's see if we can find out a little bit more. That said, he's working as a laborer at the coal yard, and Mary is staying at home with Irene. Now, moving on a little bit to the 1930 census, John and Emma have new kids, Annie and Liggett. Liggett is Emma's maiden name, and this is something common that you can find, where someone will use a maiden name or an old family name and use it as the first name of somebody or the middle name of somebody that they name as one of their kids later on. It kind of helps keep the name going in the family. Annie is 10. And look at Liggett. This is common to see. He is 4 years and 11 months. When you see a fraction like this in the age box, it's telling you months. But Irene is 17 now, except now she's listed as John's stepdaughter. In 1920, John told the census taker that Irene was his just daughter. But in 1930, he says that she is his 17-year-old stepdaughter. And look at something else. Her last name is Woods this time around. That is John's mom's maiden name, Caledonia Woods. So that's actually his mom's side of the family. This little girl was Irene Woods. He claimed her as his daughter first in 1920 and then as his stepdaughter with her last name Woods in 1930. Things might have changed a little bit to where he could tell them a little bit more of the truth of who she really was. I'd say that it is very unlikely that she is the biological child of either one of them. I personally don't think that she was the child of John or Emma. I think she was probably born out of wedlock of one of John's cousins, or maybe not even that. Maybe she was orphaned, or her parents couldn't take care of her, or something like that. There's a bunch of different possibilities it could have been. And they took her in, and instead of the public embarrassment of naming her as something else, they just said, that's my daughter. She's our daughter. No big deal. And no one thought twice about it. That happened a lot. Either way, there's something there, and I don't want to speculate too much without more facts, but I've seen it before, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's somewhere in the ballpark of the truth. But back to 1930, because this is an important year. The family lived on Park Avenue in Lewisburg, Tennessee, and this census was enumerated on April 15th, which is wild because John died in a freak accident less than 3 months later, on July 10th, 1930. This was actually the first thing that I found when I looked him up. His death certificates. Cause of death, accidental. Manner of injury, explosion. So naturally, I had to know what happened. I couldn't just leave it at that, and thankfully, it was in the paper. And I'm going to show you that. But first, I got to show you something else. Check out his undertaker, Bills McGaw. McGaw of Bills McGaw was Fred Thomas McGaw Sr. And I know that because he was my great-grandfather. He was the primary undertaker and embalmer at one of the largest funeral homes in the area. I could spend a whole video talking about him and all the things around that funeral home, or about his wife, my great-grandma, who worked with him and was actually the first female licensed embalmer in the state of Tennessee. And actually, I've got her license right here. Check that out. Yeah. Enumerated on June 24th, 1931. It's pretty cool. They still have his actual license down at the funeral home. It's still there. But enough about that. What happened to John Talley on June 10th, 1930? Here's the news article. I'll read it out loud for you folks who like to listen to these videos in the background while you're doing other stuff. Here you go. There's one word that I'm going to have to skip over, but you can see it for yourself. 2 die, 4 hurt as lightning hits Lewisburg charge. Lewisburg, Tennessee, July 10th. Dave Hardison and John Talley were killed. 2 others expected to die, and 2 more seriously injured at 4 o'clock this afternoon from a blast prematurely set off by lightning at the Franklin Limestone Company plant at Whitehead. There were 45 1.5-inch holes drilled about 20 feet deep, said to have been charged with 10 cases of dynamite. They were all connected, and it was planned, according to custom, to set them off at closing time tonight. It is supposed that lightning either struck one of the charges or the connecting wire, causing all to explode. The injured men were standing about 18 feet distant in the cut below the step of stone to be blasted off. Hardison and Talley died a short time after the explosion. Others wounded are Jesse Estes and Earl Ellis, Nashville, Frank Ewing, and Ab Snell of Lewisburg. The electrical storm preceded a severe rain and hailstorm that visited this section. Oh. So there you go. John's wife, Emma, never remarried. She died in Nashville in a hospital from breast cancer in 1958. She was buried in the same cemetery as John. I didn't know that while we were out there, and we just got a picture of him, so let's go back and see if we can find her. So I'm back out at the cemetery trying to see if I can find John's mom or John's wife or really anybody else now that I know more of who I'm looking for. And I'm going to take a quick look around. There's John right over there. So I'm going to start there. So I've walked the whole place, and it's not that big. There's not that many stones, so it's not difficult to look for them all. And so here's John right there, and there's nobody around him. No wife, no siblings, nobody. And his buddy Dave is buried right over there where that's fallen down. So there's some stones beside Dave, but I can't make those out. They look like they might be his parents or siblings or something, but I'm not really surprised. There's a lot of plots out here that are missing headstones and things. There's like entire family plots that are just missing stones. So I'm sure she's out here buried near him. So it's very important to keep something in mind when you're out here messing with this stuff. One good reason not to mess with stones out in cemeteries. I'm going to show you what happens sometimes if you're not careful. Here's a stone that's withering away to rain landing on it all the time. So I wanted to see if there was anything underneath. And we're just going to lift it up. And look at that little girl right there. Yeah, we're just going to leave her alone. We're going to put this rock back and leave her be. Be careful out there. You don't want to get bit by one of those things. Couldn't find Mary, which means that we have found yet another person for one of these stories who doesn't have a marker. They're buried, and all that's left is a patch of dirt. And I don't have much to say about her life, but I cannot imagine what it must have been like for her to go through all of that. Such a tragedy in 1930. I mean, things were bad enough as it was back then, but oh, what a decade. But let's go back to John's death certificate on Ancestry, which is certified with the state as number 16656. We can actually click to the left to view the previous certificate, and there's the other guy from the accident, David Hardison, who is certificate number 16655. His mentions the dynamite. He was also handled by Bills McGaw and is buried at Needmore Cemetery, which is called Cook Cemetery, or East End Cemetery, which is where we found John Talley. So here's Dave Hardison. What jumps out at me right off the bat with Mr. Hardison, with Dave, is the dates are wrong. It says that he was born on July 10th, 1895, and died on March 23rd, 1930. But those are backwards. He was born on March 23rd, 1895, and died on July 10th, 1930, the same day as his buddy John over there died. So that's interesting. That would make things pretty difficult if you were doing research on him, if you started with him, but luckily we started with John, so I was able to figure that out. This stone needs to be picked up and set right. I don't have the equipment or anything else to do that today, so, but that'd be a good thing for him. But here's Dave. There's a lot of empty space out here, and I think that just means there's a lot of graves without markers, because I'm seeing a lot of dips in the ground. When I get down low, I can see them. David is a little younger, only 35, but he has a wife, Minnie, and 4 kids. They lived on 6th Avenue, which was less than a mile from John on Park Avenue. And I'm not positive if this is the same one, But Roger's group in Lewisburg has a quarry, and it's not far from their houses. David's wife, Minnie, also never remarried, but she is buried about an hour away in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. She probably lived out the last few years of her life with her family out there, and they just buried her where it was a little bit closer and convenient. This was quite the visit. When you pass by stones in a field like this, there's just no telling what kind of stories each one of them holds. Granted, a lot of folks in those cemeteries and behind those gravestones they lived long lives or relatively long lives, and they died of natural causes, and all the public records say that they were a farmer their whole life, or they worked in a factory their whole life and they died of whatever. But there's a lot of them that are just unbelievable stories that are in the public record that we can find. And these stones that are out there are all that's left of whatever lives they held. I called up my buddy Blake, who is a grave digger in the area, and he knows a lot about a lot of these cemeteries around this particular area. Because while I was doing research for the video, I was coming across this East End Cemetery and Needmore Cemetery, and I couldn't find them on a map. So I hit him up, and he said, "Oh, that's Cook Cemetery. That's that same one." Oh, okay. Well, okay. That's interesting. And then sure enough, I found out that the name had kind of changed over the years. And he said, that place has a lot of history. And he asked me, did you guys go to the old Cook Cemetery? I was like, I think so. I mean, the graves were pretty old. And he said, no, there's one farther back, way farther back, that you didn't go to. And he sent me a map to it. But that's a story for another video.